My name is Amanda Van Annen. Welcome to Beauty and the Beat. Join me and my co-hosts Betsy Zane and Sophia Brad as we pierce beyond the beauty myth and get face to face with reality. Highs and lows of fashion to the challenges of motherhood, the traumas of life, heartbreak of relationships gone wrong, and how to find purpose and discover your true, authentic self. Hello, hi guys, it's Amanda, and today on the show I'm so happy because I've got with me Zalman Nelson. Zalman is a psychologist with a master's in social work. He's a practice therapist and he believes in changing your life patterns and that this is the key to more fulfilling and successful relationships. Zalman believes that by identifying and confronting and overcoming them, we encounter the deeper, hopeful, positive, happy, and confident part of ourselves that's ready for loving, respectful, and happy relationships. Zalman, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, nice to see you and nice to meet you. I was really excited to have you here because something I believe in is that, our destiny is not only determined by what goes on around us, but I believe that we determine what goes on around us. And a lot of it has to do with our life patterns and our traumatic patterns and things that have happened to us since we were children. Sure. So perhaps you can tell us a bit about yourself and how you started on this journey of therapy, and if it's something that you've always wanted to do or something you just decided to do later on in life.
Well, it's a deep question. There are many places, to start to answer that, I picked up a spiritual practice, in my 20s. So that was already part of this kind of like there's more to life and growing self, developing self, things that I never learned about me. So I've always been an experimenter, explorer of self, and then I just take that into the work that I do. I actually wanted to be a doctor, and I found that I wound up being a doctor of the soul and the spirit and the heart. I've just always been fascinated by people, helping people, passionate about giving and really helping people grow and really believing in people's potential and wanting to see people happy. And how do you do that? And it's really driven the work. I went and did training in addictions and social work and therapy, group therapy. And then as the internet was developing, just using whatever tools possible to help people grow and really explore, because the focus is how to help people be happy. And that's really driven. So I'm constantly learning and I'm constantly growing and I'm constantly trying things out on myself and bringing them into my practice with people and reinventing therapy, one client at a time. But it's all about helping people grow and not need me, to stand on their own 2 feet, and I even joke, I'd love to be out of business, that people are, healthy and doing well.
Yeah, because, the thing about therapy is I come from a background, because I'm from England and my parents, at least one of my parents is from Africa, and both in England and Africa, even though people go to therapists, it's not part of
Right.
a lifestyle like people do in America, because I find in America almost everyone has a therapist,
Yeah.
And when I first got here, I thought that was just, to be really honest, I thought that was weird.
Yeah.
But as I started to learn about myself and as I've started to grow older, I realized that we all sometimes need a guide that can put us in touch with, help us find who our true authentic self is and find our happiness by being our true authentic self. I know you have several modalities like you use in your therapy. So could you explain, because you talked about spiritual practice a bit. I'm a practicing Buddhist and I've been a Buddhist since I was 17 years old. And to be honest, it has changed my life.
Sure.
Because even though I never went to therapy per se, it made me realize so many things. By questioning myself, my actions, taking full responsibility for my life, and I think that's a very, very important thing. So I want to talk about a few things. First of all, I want to talk about the concept of taking full responsibility for your life. Because I think a lot of things stem from that, where there is always the blame of, if only my mother did this, if only my father did this, which I agree, sometimes it does affect us. But how do we overcome that and take full responsibility for ourselves and our actions and our future?
Sure. A lot to talk about there. A few things I'd say. I think it's like this. People never really learn how to live. I think there's some real basic fundamental skills. What's a feeling? What's a sense of self? You talk about, Buddhism and mindfulness practices and meditation, how amazing it would be if more of that was taught in the schools, that ability to be comfortable inside me, and I've been really connecting with this mantra going on about, with quarantines, if you can't go outside, go inside, and really helping people, noticing some people had already started some of that practice and were comfortable going there, and a lot of people not. But there's so many really basic, core, important life skills. I even see parenting now. The job of a parent is to teach life skills: how to cook an egg, how to clean a room, how to have a relationship with oneself spiritually, how to get in touch with your feelings. So there's a lot of teaching that needs to go on there. And so I think more people would naturally and easily thrive or would take responsibility of self, and if they knew how. I really believe that it's just with compassion. People don't have the skills. It's a combination of skills and some self-awareness and some support, and there's really anything is possible. I focus a lot on that, a lot of like teaching, but I gosh, there's so many points to go over. So if I don't touch one, you let me know. But I think it just all comes together. There's just so many angles to it. I have a lot of clients, let's say, that really struggle to be in touch with their feelings, and for them, starting with a mindfulness practice or meditation practice becomes like essential in order to like begin to be comfortable, getting in touch with some of the things that they feel. But there's that knock on psychology, tell me about your mother, or that kind of stuff. And I have no problem poking fun at some of these things, with psychology. I think I hybridize a ton of things, and I try to bring the best of each one to bear, and what works for one person doesn't work for another. But like, I tell people that it's true, the past is real, the past is an element, but I don't want people to get stuck in the past. I think it's about, there's a part of me that was formed and impacted by my experiences as a kid, but it's here and now present. The past is present here, and that's where it gets a bit spiritual. It doesn't have to, but the idea that a person is really two, there are these two parts to a person, and many speak of that, in different ways. But there's this I talk about in terms of an adult self and a child self. It's that child self that had these patterns, these false beliefs of self, but it's that kid inside of me that's kind of stuck in those old dynamics. So in that sense, the past is very present. And I'll have people tell me, some people do, they think I'm going to blame the parents, and, I'm not doing that. But some people have no access to memories. But it doesn't really matter, because what I spend a lot of time with people is using triggering experiences they have in the moment that are putting themselves in touch with a bunch of feelings, and no one can make us feel something that we don't already feel. And so it's here and now. But I think that conceptualization, that there's really two, and that there's this kid part and reparenting of self, and I think it empowers people, and I think people naturally want to feel empowered, especially people who have been through traumas, which is a deep experience of disempowerment. I think it's very important to help people start to find ways in which they can feel empowered. And so I like this idea that, what happened to us in the past, isn't our fault, but it's really up to us what we do about it now. And I think people want to. I think they just need the guidance and some of the tools.
Okay, I'm going to go through a few points which you made. One of them was you talked about parents teaching children when they're young life skills.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. I think that's really important. But what I do find is it's very difficult for some parents to do that because they don't have the life skills themselves. No one taught them. So it's like a karmic thing. It's like the parent doesn't teach the child doesn't teach their child, and it goes on and on, generations and generations. Yeah. And that might also have like a spiritual connection of some sort, because it becomes generational. And I also, what I deeply believe as well, and maybe this is the spiritual part of me, is I believe that just as we inherit DNA from our parents, we inherit similarities in behavior or the way we look, we look similar or whatever. I think we do inherit DNA from our parents, and we inherit,
A
like
lot more.
similarities in a lot more than that. So I'm beginning to think that we also probably, I mean, this might be on another level of thinking, inherit, their psychological behaviors or tendencies or
Hmm.
maybe slight memories or, because sometimes I find myself doing things and I think, oh, that's really similar,
Right.
and it's a question I sometimes have for myself. And I think a lot of people ignore it. But I came to the conclusion that if we, inherit a lot of things like DNA from our parents, we must inherit some of their thoughts or past traumas or actions.
For sure. I'm fascinated by the idea that, you're in an environment, an emotional environment as a kid, and you're picking up messages, and the parent that's creating those messages is projecting a lot of their own inner experience onto that experience. One way or the other, it's coming out. It's like, where do you break the cycle? Is it with the parent? Is it with the kid? But there's no doubt. And there's also compassion also, I think as we start to work on ourselves, I think it's this key of like reparenting self and taking over, where I can allow the parent to I can release them of that role. But it has to start somewhere. Like I'm a big fan of the book, The Conscious Parent. This idea that I've got to get in touch with my own stuff, otherwise I'm going to bring that into the parent-child relationship. And the children that are born to me are perfectly triggering me and putting me in touch with stuff. But yeah, that cycle can be broken at any point. But there's no doubt, that there's like mother to daughter all the way down. But the idea that really wows me is, when you think about it, because I started doing a lot of work with trauma, but complex trauma, small T trauma, where you're repeatedly exposed to really intense emotions. I'm like, well, that's so many kids. And if a person practices 10,000 hours and they become, a world-class, violinist, well, how many hours is a person in a home practicing certain responses or receiving neglect of something emotionally or non-validation or never good enough, and then internally coming up with a response to that? And it's so practiced. I think about that. But as far as there's no doubt that we're picking up certain things. However the method is, as we present, especially as an adult, to realize there's still this part of them that's stuck in a childhood dynamic.
I like what you said on that, but when I think about that, what then happens when, someone experiences this trauma or they've gone through this thing as a child, is their view of the world is very different. So you have a really big job of breaking that down and then trying to make them see a different view of the world. And when people are doing this, it's probably easier if you're a teenager or younger than when you're doing it in your 20s, 30s, 40s.
Yes and no.
Because, okay, tell me.
Well, don't you at a certain point, you're just like, you get so sick and tired of being sick and tired, when you've done the same thing. Like I typically have a lot of people who've married and divorced a few times, or they keep dating the same person. I'm just like, well, you're the one constant in all of it. So I hear you. You're right. On one hand, it's like, I've been living that way for so long. But on the other hand, the person is like hit a certain rock bottom. It's like, okay, enough. If I keep doing what I always did, I'm going to keep getting what I always got. And I'm really ready. So I hear you, but I think you can have both ways. But
Yeah,
the difference
so
is
it's up
that
to
when
the
you realize a
person.
person, yeah, but when you realize a person is two, it means that I've got this kid inside who's really acting out and needs my attention. But I've also been given this other adult part. This is why people struggle. They're like, why am I so inspired, but then I fail? Or, sometimes I'm so confident, but then I'm not. I think people have within them the ability to reparent themselves. And so I very find often the therapy work is me aligning with that part, giving them words, amplifying that voice until they can take it over on their own. And it feels right. It feels natural. It just needs to be presented. A lot of times I say things and people are like, yeah, that really clicks. And then my words become their words as they meditate on it, think about it.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So another thing you talked about was triggering.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that word triggering is very important because I feel like a lot of us don't know when we get triggered. We don't even realize we're doing it.
Right.
And, on the spiritual side of things, I feel like we keep on being presented with the same problems until we overcome them.
Yes.
So we keep on triggering ourselves, you know what I mean? And then we finally have to, and it's painful to usually it's very painful to get over that bump and, to change everything. And so how would you deal with someone going through something like that? that it's constantly doing the same thing, being triggered?
I give people a lot of information. I give them a lot of knowledge, and some people are looking to grow. They're feeling very out of control in their relationships. They feel, there's a lot of reacting. It's like the wife tells the husband, take out the garbage. He doesn't, and she doesn't just get upset. She blows full stack. That overreaction is a sign that, like, I'm upset, but there's something else going on inside. I don't think people feel safe and comfortable. They don't know where that's coming from. So I think they want to know what that's about. But I think it comes down to, we go to school and we learn certain academic subjects, but we don't learn how to feel. We don't learn what a feeling is. If you're meditating, so you're already a bit more comfortable just noticing and observing. But for the vast majority of people, it's very uncomfortable. But I remind people that nobody can make you feel anything that you don't already feel. And so a lot of people are like, he makes me so angry. She gets me so upset. I'm like, well, wait a second. Is that true? And so we talk about it, but nobody, now it's like, oh, interesting. And I think people want to feel empowered. I think people want to feel tools. They want to know what to do. And I think people it's like the final frontier is to go inside. And I think people want to go there. I think it's like a collective conscious of people really want to explore that domain and feel happier and more content and be able to validate themselves. So I think there's a natural motivation for it, and people just need the tools for it. But I really tell people, like, yeah, bring it on. Don't be afraid of your triggers. Let's work together with them. And I use a feelings chart so people could start to, like, tune into that part of them and start putting, words to the feelings that they're going through. People still need something to do. So what do I do when the feeling comes? And, well, don't be afraid, and you just give that part of your time. It's hard at first. So it's like abstract, Imagine I've got a 7-year-old kid, like, tagging along with me. But I think people want it. And once, they know what to do, either I do it with them or I do a lot of messaging with people so that there can be some interaction between sessions, because most of the growth, I think, happens between the sessions, in your day-to-day. But the triggers are so elucidative. They're so clarifying. They're so helpful. But you're very right. I mean, it's almost like we perfectly attract certain people into our life, to help us. I would say to anybody listening, everybody who's in your life right now is for a reason. And if you can swivel and stop looking, he needs to do this and she has to change. And for a second, what were you feeling in that argument? What came up for you when they did X? And it's like, whoa, I forgot about me in the whole picture. And there's some great growth that goes on there.
I totally agree with you. And then another thing I wanted to talk about was back on triggering, is that thing of, today, especially with social media and everything, there's a lot of triggers out there. Mm-hmm. So someone who's not feeling good about themselves, they're trying to get over it and they're doing better. And then, for example, they may go on social media and they see images that actually make them feel bad about themselves. But they can't stop it because when they get to the office tomorrow, everybody's talking about that stuff too. And they feel like they're constantly not good enough, which I know personally that's a psychological thing. It has nothing to do with what you're seeing, but how you feel about yourself.
Right.
But how would you advise people? Because I feel like social media, as you know, I'm sure you've heard, is you have a lot of people now that are depressed, that, don't feel good about themselves. They feel they're not good enough. Even though a lot of social media is manufactured, it's almost like they want to believe that that's the truth and that they're not good enough. And why are they not living this amazing, happy life?
Yep. It's comparisons, it's the seeking external validation. And there's something so fascinating to me about validation where, like, a person doesn't feel valid. So it's this wild addictive cycle, and I feel the pain of people who are in it, really good, sensitive souls that are having a hard time. But it's that I want to feel good about me and valid. And the reason why they don't, I'll talk about in a second, but, like, I want to feel that, but all I know is to seek it externally. So I'm going to go seek it externally, and either I don't get it and that reaffirms, see, I'm no good, or I do get it and then it creates this, like, deep tension of, well, wait a minute, which is right? The voice inside me that says I'm no good, or now I'm getting, somebody telling me that, good feedback. And usually I wind up rejecting that feedback, but then you're left not feeling valid, and so you loop again. And it's being stuck in this need for external validation, which is a leftover from childhood. I think a kid comes into the world with just the child self, and I think around 12, 13 years old, that adult part starts to come in, and that's the teenage years and trying to find ourselves. But, we're primed to absorb messages about who we are from the people around us. Parenting is not an easy job. But what happens is where that need doesn't get met, I continue to seek it externally. And I work with people and they'll tell me about their current relationship. And then we start putting some feelings to it. And then it's like, oh, when else have you felt that? Oh, this boyfriend, this girlfriend, that teacher, and it goes all the way back to the parents. So there's this part that's stuck in that loop of seeking externally. And social media is the same. It's like I need a certain amount of likes, in order to feel good about me. But one bad comment, and the whole thing is wrecked, is I've left myself very vulnerable because I still am continuing to seek a sense of self externally. And I love helping people take that back, to not compare to others, to learn how to connect to themselves and give themselves those validating, accepting emotional messages that they've always needed, they always deserved. It's not their fault they didn't get, but there's some work to do in the here and the now to connect on that so that I'm not with the up and down of, it's a good day, a bad day. If I make a mistake now, I'm totally bad. If I got it right, I'm totally good. It's so unsettling. And I think social media really feeds into that. But whereas a person can become more solid and secure and more grounded in themselves, they're the one who determines their worth and value. Then you go and you consume social media and you share and, it is what it is. And you're not needing that comparison as much. And I think people can be healthier in their use of social media.
I was thinking of a question there because on social media, apart from those that go on and they feel bad about themselves sometimes, you also have the opposite where there are people that just troll others, that go and write bad stuff on other people's. And I feel like they're also going through some sort of pain because I don't know why someone would just decide to make someone else feel bad.
You can't change somebody. I've never successfully helped somebody grow that they themselves didn't want to grow. And so, it's like a bully. It keeps bullying people, and some people go for it, some people don't. The people who, are self-assured enough that they don't go for it, you move on. Or the narcissist is just like constantly hunting, whether they realize it conscious or not, and the troller is going to troll people, and those who don't care ignore it and they move on because they didn't get that payoff. And that's why, helping people not be so vulnerable. The person who's desperately seeking external validation is going to slip right into that trap. As for the one himself or herself who's, trolling others, it's sad. I have compassion, but it's about each person. I think, I determine my worth and value, and and what's interesting is especially where someone's in a relationship and keep getting triggered by their partner. What happens is as they swivel, instead of getting triggered and getting upset at the partner, I help them look inside and tune into those feelings. What happens is you start to feel really valid and you start to become inoculated. That trigger stops working. And when your partner continues to do it, you no longer react and continue to enable that cycle. And you start to see it as their own issue. And so, people who have been susceptible to trolls in the past, then can say, this is another one of those. Let me just move on. I'm not susceptible. I'm not in a vulnerable position.
Yeah. Something I find very interesting you said is that thing about triggering, and when you're in a relationship and you are not responding, to that trigger. I mean, I personally have had experiences where, I don't respond to a trigger because I've kind of realized that spiritually that sometimes you just got to ground yourself. And there are times when you don't respond, but the other person, because they're not dealing with themselves, tries to force you to respond. You know what I mean? So you're trying not to respond and they keep on pushing and pushing and pushing. And I feel like sometimes even when you go out the room or maybe you don't call back or something, they just don't let it go, because they want that trigger. How would you deal in a situation like that?
Well, if you keep going that long and they're not changing, then, there's a serious issue. But I don't see that happens. I really don't. I think it's uncomfortable. I think it's challenging. I think the other person is so used to you always reacting. And a lot of this is subconscious and it happens so fast. These are part of our childhood defenses that we've practiced so well and are so smooth. So we continue to do it. But a lot of people want to know, how do I change my partner? Like, well, you change them by changing yourself. They're so used to you reacting the same way that they're going to test. Like a kid, you have a rule with a child and, they're going to test it a couple of times. But eventually, I don't see that continues inevitably. And if it does, there's a serious issue. Or you guide the person. I think people naturally become, I'm less needy of that person's validation, let's say, and so I'm not reacting. And I feel more empowered to really speak up, and talk more. And I help people also realize, you can be on the lookout to catch them when they're doing things right that you really like. Sometimes people want to get it right. I have a client where the husband is so afraid to lose the wife but he actually winds up doing things that push her further away. But deeper down, there's this desire to connect. And so she's really working on, as he does things, like randomly buys flowers or stuff that solidifies the connection, she really makes a big deal out of it, of like, this works and I feel great, and it's, you're getting your need met. And so there are things that can be done. But if you're changing and the person continues, either it's a deep issue with the other person, or usually it's just some additional techniques need to be added, which now that you've worked on yourself and you've got in touch with the triggering that's going on, you're in a better position. And I really find this on a spiritual level. I mean, we just attract the perfectest of people to us to help us get in touch with ourselves.
You're so right about that. And sometimes it's so hard because it's almost like they call you out whenever you're trying to hide, and you just have to face it. And could be really difficult. Another point I want to talk about was the reparenting. You talked about reparenting. What does that look like for you? And how would someone use that approach in learning to reparent themselves?
I tell people to fire their parents. They're fired. You're an adult. Fire them. But a lot of us continue to talk to ourselves as we were spoken to as kids. So that's what it means that a person has two parts. And the source of a person having two parts is a spiritual source, a mystical text. But I feel very confident about that. And it really takes a lot of techniques and brings them to a higher level. But to conceive of the self as two, which there is a part of you that's all those old childhood dynamics, but there's an adult there. There's a parent that's there. And I've seen some pretty amazing things. I've seen people locked into a certain dynamic with parents where when they shift and they're like, you know what? I'm going to take over the job here. I'm going to start tuning into myself. I'm going to use triggers. And I literally have a feelings chart that I have people and I'm just like, tune into you and where in the body are you feeling it? And walk me through this list. I don't want them using their brains because people will assess and tell you, I feel this because of this and this. No. Just where are you feeling it? Get in that moment. Be mindful. Put yourself in that scene. And the feelings are coming up. So you've got this kid part that's feeling it. And then there's the observer. There's the adult part that's noticing, tuning in. And that act there of attention and attending and accepting and whatever feeling words match. Okay, yep, I'm feeling embarrassed, shamed, impotent, ineffective, whatever it is. But just that tuning in is me giving myself that validation, acceptance, love, that unconditional acceptance that I've always needed. So it's some of those emotional needs that never happened. Well, I'm going to take over. I'm going to do this myself. And conceiving of the self as two, this adult part and this child part, enables people to do it. I've seen some amazing things where that's in essence firing my parents. I no longer treat me, the kid me, as my parents did, and speaking to myself, that harsh inner critic. But I just stop. People start to change the way they interact with parents. They have much healthier boundaries. They have much lower expectations of their adult parents, and relationships shift. You're no longer seeing the parent as this failed parent. You've kind of released them of that role. It's a very spiritual process, but even if you don't want to get spiritual in the moment, it's like, I'm free, I'm happier, I'm the one determining my worth and my value. But I really have people just, tuning in and learning to put words to their feelings. Because a lot of people, I ask them, what do you feel? And I get like angry, sad. I don't get a lot of, expression. I think we need, an improved emotional vocabulary. But it's me tuning into me, basically, me listening to me.
Okay, so I liked what you talked about. You talked about parents a bit and about firing one's parents and about, relearning. But also another thing I want to ask you about is society, because I find people who obviously have issues with parents, they are on a healing journey themselves and they try to kind of talk to their parents so that their parents realize what they've done. It's almost like trying to go back so that, not in a kind of negative way, but just trying to say, this is what happened. This is what you did to me. I forgive you. It doesn't matter. And those parents are still, adamant that, no, I did the right thing. And then sometimes it's not only the parents, there's also pressure of family, society, and even the parents, So what does one in such a situation do? Do they just forget about that part of their life and move on? Because this happens a lot.
You have to, it's all about me. And I have a lot of people that, generally speaking, when people come for support or help, they're way too far to an extreme in a particular area. And the way to work through that is to visit the opposite extreme for a while. So you get to know the boundaries, and then you can find your way back to a balance point that works. Many people need to cut their parents off for a while and get some work done. It's really, I've got to reform a relationship with self. But this whole I need my parents to acknowledge or change something so that I could then feel something else. It's codependent. It's not fair to us. It's not healthy. Needing somebody to do something so I could then feel something is not fair to you. It's not going to lead to where you want. Whereas separating and distancing and reconnecting with self and then re-engaging is effective and it's healthy. And it looks like different ways. I mean, there's some people who have been outright abused and it's really not healthy to be with the parents or around the parents. Other people need to really reduce and lower their contact time with parents or engage with them with way lowered expectations and a much clearer, more assertive voice of what's okay or what's not okay. But to re-engage in what I like to call pre-approved, like pre-approved for a loan. When I use my triggers to help me get in touch with this part of myself, I start to really validate self such that I enter into conversations. And the deepest is parents, because like this joke says that our parents push our buttons so much because they're the ones who created our buttons. So I like that one, but they have deep access to it. The interesting thing, though, is an intimate partner also has that kind of deep access and can really help us heal. But if each person looks different, mystically, spiritually speaking, is that the family, you leave a family unit and you're with a partner, and that family unit has to become the primary unit. I've seen a lot of issues with in-laws, where those kind of boundaries are blurred, but it's got to be me and my family unit first and foremost, and it could look like different things. I don't often see that something is forever or distancing or cutting off. I don't like to use the word cut off so much, but like a backing off. It's rarely is it forever, but sometimes you have to reestablish kind of a new baseline. You need some time, some disconnected time to just be with yourself and get to know yourself for the first time, and then to be able to re-engage, which could be interesting. People then go back into that environment and they see ways, number one, in which they've grown, number two, ways in which they need to continue to work. So it becomes this constant like experiment, then more training and growth, and then you go back into it.
Yeah, so in regards to the parenting thing, I've met people who have had issues with their parents, but their siblings haven't had the same issues, you see? And it's almost like the whole family's in denial, and they're having a difficult time processing it because, the siblings are like, yeah, but they weren't so bad. But that, because I've had a friend with this happen to, and it was so hard for her because she was traumatized and abused by the father.
Right.
And yet her siblings are like, oh, he wasn't so bad, because he was obviously bipolar. And I think even though she has a good relationship with her siblings, it's hard for her to come to terms with the fact that, not only them, but the family just never kind of admit it.
Right. Sometimes in those scenarios, you have to go solo. You have to have good friends around you and a partner, and you've got to do your healing and really learn to trust your own voice. And so it's not, I can feel clear, that I know what happened, as if you agree with me that it happened. It's more of that I need you to be on board so I can then feel what I feel. And sometimes there's that one courageous person in the family that's like, listen, this wasn't okay, and they choose to engage, let's say, with their siblings, not during family functions, separately, or sometimes there's one that you connect to, and so you enjoy that, and not like, oh, but we're not all connected, so I can't enjoy it. It's it's each situation different, but it's always the same. We need to learn to be good with ourselves, to be okay with ourselves, and again, if I'm in a situation where I need someone to do something so that I can then feel something I need to feel, it's codependent, unhealthy, and it's not fair to us.
I like what you said there. If you're in a situation where you need someone to do something so I can feel the way I want to feel, that's a really, really important thing you've said, because I feel like half of the time we all do this, be it at work, in relationships, in life, trying
it's
to do
external
things.
validation, yeah.
Exactly. And it's so important when you can just be your true, authentic self, and which is hard because everyone has an idea of what your true, authentic self should be.
Right. But this again, we were never taught how to be ourselves. I really have so much compassion. People want to be healthy and happy and successful, loving and giving. There's some real important basics we never learned. But on the flip side, when people do learn some of those basics, like year 2, and how to feel and how to deal with a trigger and how to use that, when we learn that with a little bit of support, people really grow. They feel good about themselves. Well, I see people able to really talk themselves through situations, kind of coaching themselves. It's a skill that can be learned.
Yeah, so another thing I want to touch on is feelings, because feelings play a big part in this, because,
Hmm.
it's the feeling that triggers the, I guess, emotion, and then triggers the action, and then it goes on and on. So, how does one really work with their feelings to stop? I don't want to say to stop feeling a certain way, because I don't think we can ever stop feeling a certain way, but how to address it differently.
I tell people you're allowed to feel, like, bring it on. So much, there's a lot of like physical ailments that are, me suppressing emotions and feelings. There's some kids who grew up in a home, and sometimes the home isn't stable for any one of a number of reasons. It could be an alcoholic parent, or it could be just, violent emotions, any one of a number of reasons. We don't feel safe and secure. And some kids can't pick up a message of, I better not feel, because if I do, and I rock the boat, so maybe the whole house will come down. That kind of we there's something we learn to tell ourselves that helps us process what we're going through as kids, and we take that message with us, and then we're not feeling, or ignoring feelings, as we get older as adults. But it's really all about, it's okay to feel. That's what I like about using a feeling chart. I got people that got on their phone, a JPEG on the phone, so people think they're texting and they're really just hanging out with their inner kid, because we don't know the words. I think it's as simple as, I'm allowed to feel, okay, and let me tune into it, and no one else has to know, but what am I feeling? A lot of times I think it's a question of vocabulary, what different feelings are, and knowing that it's okay to face a feeling and sit with a feeling. I don't have to be afraid of it. And when people have those tools, it's something very freeing. I don't have to suppress or hold this down. It's okay to feel. I'm allowed to feel. And it's me. It's me getting to know me, and that it's normal, to normalize it, and to feel that sense of acceptance, and that it's really okay. It's a basic skill, but a big part I find is the vocabulary, the emotional vocabulary. What is it? What are you feeling? And so when I'm with myself and I'm tuning into the feelings, and I'm starting to go through a list of words, and I'm putting those words to the feelings, I'm starting really to get to know it, and I realize other times I felt those feelings. At the same time, something that's coming up is that I now have more vocabulary to describe what I feel. So when someone says, "How are you feeling?" I actually have words to describe it, and I see that it's okay, and people hear me and they understand what I'm saying better. So I think the general message is that it's totally okay to feel, and I think people need some hand holding and some guidance into how to allow that to be. But it's a big key, because that kid part, that child part, speaks feelings. I've had people do this. They have a trigger in the moment. I'm like, okay, forget whatever he did to you. Where were you feeling it? We tune into it, and then all of a sudden, boom! It's like, oh, there's a few words stick out, and they go, oh, there's that time I was 9 and such, because the feelings are the same. And so it's this, that part of us speaks the language of emotion, of feeling.
And the thing about feelings is it becomes a pattern. Usually, once you get the trigger, then you feel a certain way, and then you behave, and it's the same thing over
Right.
and over again.
Right.
And a lot of people will say things like, "Oh, it's always them. It's those people that
Yeah.
are behaving like that." And on the spiritual level, we then end up attracting the same situations again.
Exactly. Over and over. That's why I say to people, and that's why I started working on relationships, because I find there's something difficult about therapy. It's two things people generally don't like, going into themselves, which is uncomfortable, and spending money. And you put the two together, and it could be, challenging. But we need to do that work. We need to look at ourselves. But I find people more willing, there's something with my relationships. And most people, I think, come to therapy or personal growth because they want help with their relationships. But it's really in those relationships, we definitely attract that same kind of a thing. And that's why I said before, when you're older, you're right, you're more set in your ways. But in the same hand, the person says, I really can see how I keep attracting the same person, and I'm the one constant in all of the relationships. Okay, I think I'm ready to take a look inside.
I mean, my personal belief is you have to be kind to yourself and kind to others, and you have to try not to be too hard on yourself. You're never a failure. You're always a work in progress. That's my philosophy to myself, because I feel sometimes societal pressure just makes people feel so bad about themselves. You have these really successful business people that go commit suicide because they lost their money. And I'm like here thinking, well, it's not that bad. I mean, I know you're bankrupt, but you had a great career. You can get another job and start again. But to them at that point, they will jump off a building and, they leave their family and everyone to suffer. But I feel that's even spiritual work is so important in this process, like, or because I feel like without spirituality, even for myself, I wouldn't be where I am today. It's made me question a lot of things about my life, and it's also given me light bulb moments,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
I've just been like, huh,
Yeah.
and now when I see situations that repeat themselves in my life over and over again, I actually try to break them down by thinking, what am I doing?
Yeah. There's a
That
message
keeps
here.
on attracting, because otherwise I just, most people blame everybody else. And I find it very hard, especially when I have friends that, they've had traumas in their life. They acknowledge it, they think they're dealing with it, but now they have children, and then either they're overprotective of the same thing happening to them, and the same thing starts happening to their children because they're overprotective. So I'm like, and I can see it because I'm coming from a spiritual point of view, and I can see the karmic thing going on, the karmic bond, everything.
Yeah.
And I don't know how to explain it to them.
Well, this is what I like. I could be triggered by my kid. It could be my partner. It could be my business partner. I see a lot of this. The workplace has this. People bring their baggage and stuff with them into the workplace. But, spiritually speaking, why is this child, of all the potential souls in the universe that could have been my child or my first child or my second child, my third, whatever it is, wow, they hit this button, that one triggers that thing. There's definitely a message that's there. But it could be scary, to take a look at it. But that's an interesting place to, again, most of the times the kid is doing something, the parent's having a reaction, and then the question, all the parenting books are, how do you control that particular behavior? And what's the one thing that's left out completely? Hey, parent, what's going on for you? What are you feeling in those moments?
Mm-hmm.
And it's always a trigger. It's a familiar trigger. They're probably feeling some similar things with the partner, and they can tell you times as a kid they felt similar. So it's that same part of me. And you're right. It's just a question. We're going to keep getting these messengers, people putting us in touch with a part of ourselves until we say, okay, I got it. I'm going to look inside. That swivel is what that moment's all about. And I think more people would do it if they had some guidance and some help in how to do it. I think people get really frustrated, and I think they realize, okay, what I'm doing is just not working, and they get really, really drained, really burnt, and then they're really like, okay, I need. There's an opening that's there, and for everyone it's different, where that time comes. But it's that I'm no longer willing to do what I've been doing until now. I need something different. But that's a really powerful moment. Some call it a rock bottom moment, but it's a powerful moment where somebody's really open to really exploring themselves, responsibility, ownership, looking at themselves and their own feelings, their own role in things.
Yeah, because I feel like feelings play such a huge part in all of this, and us learning how to change. I don't necessarily think it's change the feeling, but change our approach to the feeling.
Yeah.
And how we address these things. And on that
they shift over time. They do shift over time. Like that part of me that's feeling unstable, insecure, not safe, as I tune into that more and more, those feelings will lessen. And people can see the shift in the type of words that they are choosing in the relationship to certain situations. It's, I need to feel valid. Well, as I'm validating you, well, there's less of that need to feel valid. So there is a shift. It does change. And then we can get to more subtle levels of feelings. But there is hope. People really can grow and do grow.
Yeah, I mean, there is hope. And then another thing I wanted to talk about was, because I feel like one thing that really affects people is when they've been through a traumatic childhood, especially child abuse of some sort, physical, sexual, whatever it is. It's a big, huge trigger.
Yeah.
It's a massive trigger, and it is something that people carry for a long time. And unfortunately, we have cultures where it's not fine to address it. There's a lot of cultures like that where you don't address it. Everybody pretends like it didn't happen, and they suffer themselves, and it's going on generation to generation. And people even get into relationships. They never tell their partners about all this, which is fine if they can deal with it. But, it affects how they are. And I wanted to segue this into spirituality because I believe, my personal belief is our emotions and our traumas stay somewhere in our body somewhere.
Oh, for sure.
Feel, because I've worked with all sorts of modalities where they use either some tapping, massaging, or whatever to kind of get these past memories. Because there's this thing called muscle memory, where you actually remember it physically.
Yeah.
And they try to use these modalities to try to get this out of your system. Not out, but to ease it. And, and
The trauma experience has to end. The body is still reacting, trying to protect yourself. But what's interesting is that Kabbalistically speaking, when we talk about these two parts, sometimes it's referred to as two souls. I call it the adult self and the child self. But that child part is embedded in the body. It's very physical and bodily oriented. And it's the one that's holding on to those traumas. It's the body is still reacting, trying to protect us. And it's why so many of these body work type approaches, the yogas, stretching, body psychology, these things that are bodily oriented are so effective because it targets that, use the body to, first of all, to stop the triggering and to stop the trauma response, but also to gain access to that kid part. It's very bodily oriented.
It's amazing because most people wouldn't think that you actually remember your thoughts and memories. They stay in your body. We just think it's in our mind, in our brain somewhere, but it's like a thing where your whole body reacts, right?
Everything is, listen, if I have a memory, being mistreated, and I'm still, that memory I haven't processed or worked through. So it's me being neglected, and I've not stood up for myself. So it still sits in my neurons firing as this reminder that I don't count, I don't matter, until I get in touch with that and I go back and I'm like, that was wrong. And I play director, as one exercise of, what should have been said, or my adult self maybe comes into that picture and screams or protects me or something. And I've reclaimed that memory. And now as it sits in the neurons firing, it's a different experience. It was they're wrong, but not that it's, an inherent truth about who I am. So you have it on the brain level, you have it on the body level. It's fascinating. I've had people that I'm like, listen, we're going to stop our work now because you really don't have access to thoughts and feelings because you've been through trauma. Usually it's that complex trauma, something deeply emotionally disturbing and beyond their control. But the body continues to react and they really don't have access. And so I encourage people to spend some time really in body-oriented somatic experiencing work, yoga work, whatever works for them. But you need to reform a relationship with self, with the body. You need to turn off that trauma response and reclaim access to self, and then they can continue on in some of this kind of more thought, feeling based type work.
If someone was going through this, could you give me a step-by-step approach of how they would deal with overcoming this? Like just someone going through a trauma, not feeling good about themselves, how will they deal with overcoming it? Like they could come to you, but if they just practical steps that anyone can use, just like a roadmap.
I have my emergency first aid, approach, which is, anybody reaches out to me and I talk to them and do a consultation. I'm just like, take these 3 steps. It's going to take 10 minutes for your day, but run with it and go with it. And that I give to everybody is like a first aid kind of thing. And, and it's this, I give them this feelings chart with a description of how to do it and to tell them, take a minute a day as you're triggered, use that to don't be afraid of your feelings anymore, tune in. So it's about a minute a day, to go through the list that I have and where in the body am I feeling it, which words, match it and just, okay. Get it, not that kind of knee-jerk, reflex of run from emotion, but learn to just kind of face it and sit with feelings. So that's about a minute. There's another exercise I'm just in love with where you put your hand on your chest over here and you say, I love myself. I love my name. I tell me my name. A lot of people can't do it. But just once a day, I'm like, I love you, Zalman. I could not do it at first. Mm-hmm. But if you can't, you can say, good morning, Zalman, or, whatever it is. But it's just the touch here, the hormones that are released, I don't remember which one it is, but that's also, first thing in the morning. And then the third part is something body-oriented, like yoga. So you're talking, max 10 minutes a day or something. But just, it's easy and it's doable. And it's a tool that people could use. Especially the feelings chart, they can use anytime they want, or that, I love myself. I can do that anytime I want. And, you hop on YouTube and find someone you connect with, be it stretching, be it yoga. But it's just quick, doable, easy, free. Start right away, start feeling good about you. I think people, the opposite, trauma is feeling, disempowered, overwhelmed, disempowered. And so to help somebody start to feel more empowered as soon as possible, I think is really important. So I'll give people those 3 tips. I'll send them some links quickly and try this, be in touch, let me know how it goes, and it helps people start moving in a good direction.
So you call this the feeling chart?
Yeah, I have a feelings chart.
Okay, so then it's one of the processes you use.
It's a chart I use. It goes from mild, medium, strong, and intense, just increasing levels of intensity, and they're just words. They're feeling words. I want a person to tune in, and like we were talking about the body, almost always. Sometimes at first people are not aware of it. I ask them like, "Oh, you had that argument yesterday. Okay, how were you feeling?" They're like, "Well, I was feeling bothered." That's about all I could get. That was someone I spoke to recently. But I was like, "Okay, where were you feeling it?" A lot of times people are not aware. But once I've asked a person that, the next time it happens, they tune in more. But you're focusing on a body part as an anchor, and then you're allowing your mind to go through a list where you don't have to engage the brain. You're just using it to read the words, but staying really tuned into those feelings and begin to put words to what those feelings are. Just that process, I find, is just so powerful. Having the words to describe what you feel, that self-acceptance and validation, that I'm tuning in and paying attention to that kid inside me. So it's a chart. I mean, there's plenty of charts. Google Images, feelings chart. You'll get a whole bunch. It's less important the exact chart, and the more that the chart is doing the remembering of all the vocabulary words. I don't want to memorize vocabulary. I just want to tune into what I'm feeling. That experience of stop focusing on others, tune into you. A trigger is a part of you is trying to talk to you. How do I listen? Well, let me tune in and start putting some words to those feelings. So you could use anything, or I have on my website what I call Triggered in Quarantine, which describes this process of being two parts, and it has what I call the trigger method, which is described of tuning into a part of where do I feel it, and what am I feeling, and processing it. And just a basic tool of what do I do when I'm feeling particularly intense feelings. So that's available free on my site. But you could Google anything. Like, I just want to help people, honestly. If they want more support, they can find me, but just go to Google, search feelings chart, go to Google Images, and start playing around with the chart. It's less important how perfect the chart is and more that you're being helped to discover the words that really resonate with the feelings that are coming.
And the good thing about therapy these days is, they don't actually have to come to your office. You can do it online. You can do it through Zoom, FaceTime, all these different things.
Or messaging. I've been really into messaging therapy. I worked for Talkspace for about 1.5 years, and then I continue to do it. I'm just a huge fan. It's people who wouldn't go to therapy otherwise, or people who have fears or discomforts, or they can't afford it, and I'll do messaging with them. I use Telegram Messenger, and I have just a messenger just for that. And people write when they want, as much as they want, whenever they want, in the moment they feel it. And once a day, 5 days a week, I sign in for about 10 minutes. I'm reading, responding. But people heal so much.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's great.
That's amazing. Great. I really like that idea, because you can get therapy in the moment. You just know that there's someone there for you. There's someone holding your hand through this at that moment.
Well, that's amazing. You've also written, you've processed it, you've put it into words. You're already feeling better because it's not inside anymore. It's out in front of me. I have a written record, and people can look back at how they were feeling a month ago and see the growth and progress. And on top of it,
it's really interesting.
Yeah.
So that said, if someone was looking for you to find you, where can they find you?
You can find the website, zalmannelson.com, ZALMANNELSON, and or I'm all over social media, Therapy with Zalman. I'm on all the social media platforms, and just connecting, talking to people. My favorite are comments. I like to engage with people, to talk and to share and really communicate and connect. And
I really like what you do, like on Instagram, all your daily quotes and everything. Even I read them. They're very inspiring.
A lot of those are anonymously taken from messaging therapy sessions.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the ideas that came up.
Inspiring.
Oh, thanks. I'm glad you liked it. And people are connected, but they're real. They're not like I sat and conceived of it. It's like something that it's wording that came to me as I'm trying to connect to someone and help them. And so I'll share it anonymously, but that's where a lot of that inspiration comes.
Yeah, because I really like your messaging therapy session, because I think it's something that is affordable to most, and people can, they get the support they need.
Yes.
And whenever they need it. It's really interesting. So guys, you should check that out. Maybe I'll be signing up for that myself. Because I feel like we all need, and it's been really great talking with you today. The insights have been amazing. And what I try to do here is to just, we're trying to make the world a better place. And first of all, we have to heal ourselves and be able to think better and think clearer and find our true authentic selves and our true, and live a fulfilled life. And in order to do that, we have to heal our wounds, be them in the past or in the present. So it was a really, really pleasant conversation. And thank you for taking time to talk to me.
For sure. Let's talk more soon.
Yeah, definitely.